I decided to go to college because as I was growing up, all of those childhood aspirations that I had for employment and different careers all needed a college degree and a college education. Every time I was talking to my mom or some other member of my family, they encouraged me to go to college because they knew that those kind of occupations and those careers would need a college education. I think two of my greatest inspirations in attending college were my grandmother, who had attended college a little bit, but at a community college level, and it wasn't for any academic credit. It was for things like how to bake cakes and those sorts of things. So she was never able to attend college for those things because she didn't graduate from high school, and she actually only completed through the third grade when she was younger, in the 1940s. And then my mother never graduated from high school either, but they always saw the value in education and the way it could afford someone opportunities. So they were my biggest inspirations for attending college. My mother was a great friend and a great parent. In a lot of ways, though, I helped to raise my two younger sisters, and I was a mentor and a role model to them. And moving, so many hours so far away from home originally was a difficult thing, and I found myself traveling home as often as I could, and in a lot of ways that's one of the reasons that I didn't connect so much that first semester, is because I found myself trying to go home, if not every weekend, as much as possible, to be with my family, to help support sisters, to be connected in that small knit community that it was a county of 7,000 people rather than a campus of 27,000. So it felt more like home, and because it was something that was familiar. And coming to college, things were less familiar, and I felt out of place. So I did feel myself being drawn back home, and I had considered even at one point transferring back to a school closer to home that was more local. But in the end, I'm glad that I didn't, because I ended up having a wonderful experience once I connected socially and was able to navigate resources, and I started asking people questions and seeking things out. It started to feel a lot more like home, and it started to feel a lot smaller, and I had my own community within the larger community. Moving from my home to college was overwhelming, to be honest. I remember that first semester and the move-in process, and there were tons of people. I grew up in a small town in northeast Georgia that had about 7,000 or 8,000 people in the entire county. So when I moved to college and I moved to an urban area, it was overwhelming. There are more people on campus than I had ever met in my entire life. So it was a lot. I think that that first semester was really hard, especially those first few weeks, because I was always introduced to people by other people in a lot of cases, and this was the first time that it was my opportunity to make friends and my opportunity to meet new people. And it was a little awkward at first. It was hard to meet people, and it was difficult to kind of establish a social setting. Academics was my comfort zone because I always did well in high school and in grade school. So when I came to college, academics weren't really a huge struggle. It was getting connected to resources and getting connected to people. I think other than the fact that it was hard to meet people in college was, having to do everything on my own. For the first time, I was managing all of my own finances, and I had to find a job without the network of my family or, some type of network that I was used to. When I was in high school, I worked in restaurants and I worked in a couple of local mercantiles. And when I moved to college, I had to find my own job, and I had to find my own way of doing that because it wasn't someone my mom knew or my uncle knew or something like that. So it was difficult to kind of manage all of the resources and kind of establish myself as an independent adult. This was the first time that, I was going to be balancing my own checkbook, and I was going to be, making sure that I got to a job, making sure that I got up when the alarm clock went off, all of those things. So all of those aspects of independent adulthood that you didn't really have to depend on yourself for, you always had someone else to depend on, made it a challenge. When I first arrived at campus, I I was used to working in restaurants, and of course they have the dining services on campus, but I didn't really connect two and two together. So I was looking for restaurants in the general community, and I think when I was building a social network, I kind of inherently built that social network through the restaurant that I had started working in when I arrived to campus in the community, and that really hurt building my social network on campus because I was more connected to off-campus people than I was on-campus people. So when I'm talking with students now, I definitely encourage them to get on-campus employment because it's just another way to connect to people in the campus community. Later on, I did get involved in campus, through like residential living, and I worked as an orientation counselor, and I worked as a variety of other student worker roles, which I found really helpful because it allowed me to establish a social network and allowed me to connect to service professionals on campus and faculty members and those sorts of things that I didn't really get when I was working in off-campus employment. So it was a struggle at first, but I definitely found my way eventually. And a lot of that was just, acclimating to campus, and it took some time. It was a huge challenge because I grew up in a single-parent, low-income family situation. My mother was raising me and two other sisters, and we were all living on less than $25,000 a year. And so it was a continual struggle, growing up. And of course, as soon as I was able to get a work permit, I was working in high school, and I was helping to shoulder the responsibility of a lot of my own, personal incidental items, school supplies, things like that. So in a lot of ways, I was used to supplying those things for myself financially, but also it was a struggle to acclimate to financial aid and, tuition and what fees were appropriate. And, if I saw mistakes in my student account or I saw things that didn't look right, those things it made it difficult to be able to decipher what was right and what was wrong because I wasn't familiar, and there was no one to pick up the phone and say, this fee looks like it's been attached to my student account. I don't know, if it's supposed to be on there or not. There was no one at home to call. So I had to go to some stranger in, a building in an office that was largely unfamiliar to me and try to negotiate these things. And it made it for an interesting experience, but it definitely helped me to acclimate and become an independent adult, I think. But it was a struggle. My academic advisor was a big help to me. It was an advisor that I got a little bit later down the road. I think my first and best resource was my resident advisor, my RA in the hall. He was really helpful in getting me connected to our hall council, which is a hall government inside the residence hall. And I hadn't really, like I said, established that social circle in the past. And so getting connected to hall council, becoming actively involved in the programs, and meeting other people that I was living with in the hall but not necessarily next door, that was really helpful. And my RA was a great resource for getting connected both in the residence hall but also finding out about all the other student organizations on campus that I had been involved in those sorts of things in the past in high school and when I was younger, but when I came to campus I didn't even know that some of the student organizations existed. So whenever I was able to connect with those student organizations, that's when I really felt like I blossomed socially because I was getting involved in things that I really cared about, things that I was passionate about, but I'd never knew existed without my RA. I think one of the best pieces of advice that a first-generation student should take is to not get overwhelmed. In a lot of cases, even if you are coming from another urban area to your university community and it doesn't seem too large, there are a lot of resources and services and student organizations, and there's a lot of new terminology and a lot of bureaucracy that comes along with university, and I think that it can be easy to be overwhelmed, especially at that young age when you're experiencing a lot of things for the first time that are new, but not just new things in general as you're growing older, but university is very new. And so taking things one thing at a time, introducing yourself one student organization at a time, taking each term by term to learn those new vocabulary words, and learn everything that's new to you one thing at a time. It's important to see things big picture, but at the same time it's important to see things as they are in the singular, and take it one student organization at a time. Take it one grant or one loan at a time if it's financial aid, or if it's classes, each lecture, take it as it comes, and don't get overwhelmed in the big picture.